Welcome back to From Corporate to Cashflow. We are Andrea Cannon and Liz Schwab, two pharmacists navigating the process of building time and financial freedom through real estate investing and lending while working our day jobs. Navigating the journey is difficult, but our podcast guests are experts in showing us how it's done. And today we have the absolute lovely Kaila Appleman with us here today. Kaila, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
We are excited to have you too. And Kaila and I have actually worked together on a couple of deals now, and hopefully are going to continue to work on a ton more deals going forward. So once again, super excited to have you.
I think I want to share really quickly, Andrea, you and your team were actually on my list of teams I wanted to work with because I worked with them as I was an end buyer's TC, and I loved them because they were so transparent and they were amazing to work with and everything flowed. And I was like, they are my dream team to work with. I want to do more deals with them. And so I'm super stoked that we've done several together.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that feedback. That really means a lot. And I mean, that's our goal when we're, doing this business, is to try to do everything on the up and up and the right way, which is one of the absolute main reasons why we have loved working with you since we worked with you on that one deal, because we realize how absolutely valuable you are.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll get into a lot of that today, right, Kaila, as we ask you a few questions here and really go into why having a TC is so important. But before we get into that, I would love to start at the very beginning. And if you could maybe just tell us a little bit about your journey. So basically, how did you get started and how did you end up kind of where you are and what are you up to these days?
Yes, absolutely. I'd love to share my story. So I actually climbed the corporate ladder very early on in my 20s. I became a corporate exec in the retail merchandising buying management space at the age of 26. And it was a smaller company. We had 30 doors, but then I moved to San Francisco and I, before the age of 30, climbed the corporate ladder with that company in e-commerce and retail merchandising. That was 8 years ago that I left and said goodbye to the corporate world. My husband, who wasn't my husband at the time, but we decided we were going to build his soft tissue practice in Denver, Colorado from literally ground zero. We moved with our car of things and just started fresh. We had $10,000 in our bank account and we were like, we're going to, live on this for about 6 months and we're just going to figure it out. So we built his practice. It was super successful. And in 2019, we had our son Jax, and 5 months later was COVID. So we had a COVID baby, and then we shut the practice down for 6 weeks, which means no income. 6 weeks, no income. We were like, what are we going to do? We can't rely on a service-based industry, if one, we were still in COVID, but what are we going to do to support ourselves and our family and build wealth? So we fell onto Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And that was a pivoting moment for my husband and I, and our mindset totally shift of okay, we came from corporate 401k, you work your 9 to 5 and you actually end up working more. You're working 60 hours a week on your salary. And, our financial advisor told us, you have to have 1 million net worth before you can start having investment properties. That's where I want you guys to be. And we were like, how are we going to get there? We really want to get there and we want to get there fast. So then my husband stumbled across Pace Morby. And he started watching his YouTubes and he was like, "Kay, you need to look at this. This is another way." I thought Pace was a scam at first when I first heard it, and subject to, I'm like, who would do this? But here I am, it has changed my life. And to kind of keep going with the flow of, we joined Sub 2.5 years ago, and we just found out we were pregnant with Gemma. We weren't expecting it. She was a surprise, and she ended up being, I call her my guiding light, but she was a surprise. And so we had just joined Sub 2. I was going to go full in, but my husband was like, "You're pregnant. Can you go full in?" And, Jax was a young toddler at the time. And I remember sitting at the kitchen counter. I looked at him. I was, of course, uncertain and nervous, but I looked at him and I said, "Watch me. I'm going to do it. Yes, I'm going to go full in." And so I started, though, you guys, wholesaling. I started wholesaling when I joined Sub 2 because I thought, oh, I'm going to bird dog. I'm going to get all the properties that we want. My husband was like, you're going to be great at this. You're on the phones all the time. And I failed at it. I failed at it because it didn't light me up. It didn't light me up. I wasn't excited about it, and I was not consistent.
Mm.
And I then entered a phase of a really challenging pregnancy that I think happened for me, not to me, but happened for me to slow me down, to really get clarity on what direction I wanted to go in the real estate space. And I did a lot of inner work and a lot of healing to get through that challenging pregnancy. When Gemma was born, there was no more challenges after that. And Top Tier TC had launched, but I missed the sign up because I just had Gemma at the same time that it launched, and then they closed adding anyone to it. So in bed one night, a couple months after it launched, I said, God, angels, universe, guide me to my path. And you know what popped up on my phone was a Top Tier TC ad on Facebook. And I said, I'm okay. This is it. I'm going for it. I'm going full in. This is what I'm going to do. And it started off with like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to give it all my energy, and I'm going to make 5K a month. And it's going to help with our mortgage. It's going to help with Jax's school. It's going to help support Gemma. And it turned into this passion of mine. I love helping investors. These complex deals like fuel my soul. Every transaction is different with all of them. A sub 2 is not the same as another sub 2. There's things that pop up and you have to problem solve and you collaborate and you work together. And it has like lit up my soul, honestly. And I feel so passionate helping inspire others in this space of like, you don't have to have a license to be in real estate. You don't have to have a lot of capital to be successful. You don't have to like wholesaling to be successful in this space. And you don't have to like, I mean, I am more social out there. I'm trying to be more like vocal, but you don't have to be successful in this space. You don't really have to start with anything. Like my overhead was Gemma on my hip and my laptop and my phone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then now I have built my vision. I have my own TC company, but I have a name for it because I do have a larger vision in mind that I'm working on my clarity for, to be, being able to inspire other women out there, inspire other moms, because you can build something for yourself, your own business for yourself that is successful to you. And that looks different for everybody.
Yeah, no, I love that because we've talked about this a lot in other podcasts, but basically figuring out what your goals are, right? And how your personality maybe aligns with different things. I know that Pace talks about different avatars and like how your personality may align with different roles in real estate. And it sounds like you found the one that fits like perfect for you. And like, as you said, it like really lights you up. So obviously that's a really great fit. I did just want to dive into a few things that you said. So can you explain what TC stands for and what, in a broad sense, it is?
Yes, I always forget that when you say TC, people don't know what you're speaking about. So transaction coordination in the creative space, I like to say it's more transaction management or even strategist, because they are so complex and there's a lot of nuances behind the scenes. But it's really another set of eyes for an investor. It is a checklist that you're following throughout the transaction to make sure that it's successful, and each transaction type has everything checked off that it's needed. And it's also reviewing the closing documents, being another set of eyes for that, and catching any errors along the way. So even if you have a awesome title company, awesome attorney, we're all human and they are super busy. They're doing hundreds of transactions, and they might be the best title company or attorney out there, but there could be errors. And I have experienced that.
Yes. Yes. So on that same line, so Andrea and I always use transaction coordinators, right? To your point, just to help with the whole process, keep in communication of what needs to be done, like where we are in the flow of everything. So your job is to stay on top of it. So can you give us just some highlights of what a TC would do throughout the process in order to keep different individuals informed? Like what type of updates are you doing? What are you doing on a day to day? Just so that people who are lending money and other people that are interested in being involved in real estate kind of understand what that role looks like.
Mhm. Yeah, so it's kind of like the quiet powerhouse, right? I think the TC is just kind of like quiet in the background doing all the checks that they need to do. So they're communicating with title, they're communicating with all parties. So buyer, seller, is there a wholesaler involved? Is there a lender involved? Making sure that you're tracking to the timeline. If there is a lender involved, does the lender have their documents in place for their security protection? Is title clear on what their terms are, or is that blueprint not clear and there needs to be an amendment or communication that needs to happen of what the terms actually are? If there are any changes, so if there's renegotiations throughout the transaction coordinator will help with amendments and making sure that it's clear. And so everybody understands what's going on. So it's full transparency. It's really full alignment and collaboration and working together. But the TC is the person leading at and looping in all parties as they go.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then just one last thing before we kind of switch here is since I'm just so interested in the TC role, right? Because you really are the glue that holds everything together. And as I just mentioned, Andrea and I always use TCs on all of our deals because we don't want anything to fall through the cracks. So at a very high level, can you just give some people some examples of what would be a potential like red flag, just furthering your value of having a TC and saying like, hey, our TC recognized this might be an issue and saved us from investing, or hey, our TC realized that, maybe this isn't, it sounds kind of sketch. So just like the feedback that you would possibly give others for red
Mhm.
flags.
Yeah, so I have so many of these, but I'm going to share one recently, actually, Andrea. This was one that we worked on together. And the title company, I think you've used some before, but the wholesaler actually chose them. And I like to vet my title companies. When I'm coming in from the end buyer, I like to vet my title companies. Whether escrow has been opened or not, I like to know, do you know how to handle this transaction? It's a subject to transaction, for example. And what documents do you prepare for subject to transaction? Because some title companies and attorneys do different documents, unless told otherwise. So what is their process, right? I'm always leaning on title. What's your process? And then I know what mine is, and let's have a conversation if it doesn't align. Well, they have done a lot of subject to transactions. And when we got to, okay, I'm going to send you the power of attorney to include in the seller's documents to have signed and notarized. We will need to see scans of those before funds are dispersed. They asked why you needed a power of attorney. Why would you need a power of attorney for a subject to transaction? You absolutely do. And how would the buyer communicate with the mortgage company? Their answer was, well, the wholesaler has an authorization form. Who prepared that authorization form? What does that look like? Was it just something from Chat GPT? We don't know, because we use a power of attorney that's prepared by an attorney specifically for this transaction. So that's one. There are some of Oftentimes what I see is the title commitment. So reviewing the title commitment. And are there additional liens on there? Are there judgment liens on there? Because a lot of times title will just send over that title commitment. Here's the title commitment, but they're not actually saying what's on there. And so the TC will go through that on creative deals and let the buyer know, hey, I saw 3 judgment liens on there. I asked title to clarify, is it actually that seller, or is it just a generic name that it pulled in and it's just fallen off at that point? Or is it their judgment liens? And then renegotiations have to happen. Another thing that I see for red flags are it's just not clear. So I will have clients bring their contracts to me. They've already signed the assignment contract, and I'm looking at them like, this doesn't make sense. I actually had one where the purchase price was $30,000 on the assignment contract. And the title company put the purchase price as $30,000. And it just, the math wasn't mathing because they were taking it over subject to. And that wasn't correct, but it was because the contract was so vague and the assignment contract didn't make sense. And so we did an amendment or an addendum to make it clear. But there's so many red flags. And I think that is the beauty of a TC, can point those red flags out. And I also call them yellow flags, like, hey, investor, these are some yellow flags I saw. These are some red flags. Present them to them. And they'll decide from their risk tolerance, or it opens it back up for negotiations.
Yeah. I mean, those are such good highlights. And I think it really just drives home the point that it's necessary to have a TC, right? Because unless you are full-time investing, but only buying one deal at a time where you can devote 100% of your attention to that and nothing else, you don't have a family, you don't have properties you're managing, you don't go on vacation, you're literally just doing that, odds are you are also going to be distracted as the buyer, right? And so there's just so many nice things when you have a TC in place, that they are taking a look at your deal and following along through the whole process and making sure that things aren't getting missed. And I mean, I think even if people have done, 1, 2, 3 creative deals before, they still should use a TC going forward. And even probably more so because they're getting comfortable. They could get like lax about certain things. They're like, oh yeah, I've done this before. And then like not even realize that they're missing things. And also if they're trying to scale their business or their number of properties they're buying, right? Can be, huge gaps there if they're not following along with the transaction all the time. So this is definitely where we find so much value in working with you.
Yeah. I think another misconception too is that investors will just lean heavily on title and attorneys of, oh, they say they do creative deals, they have it all handled. But there's so many things behind the scenes that the TC does and knows and can spot and look for that title's not going to do for you. Another one that I had that was really interesting, I asked for a mortgage statement. So a lot of times investors will purchase subject to or have a deal under contract subject to, and I'll ask, do you have the current mortgage statement? They don't, or they send it to me. I had one recently where I looked at it and I said, this looks like there was a loan modification just off of how it was presenting on the statement. And so I had them go back to the wholesaler and ask for the mortgage statements previous to that so I could see the trail. And sure enough, there was a loan modification. So then we asked for the partial claim loan mod docs so that the investor could read through those. Okay, it was finalized. When was it finalized? What are those terms? And what is their risk tolerance? Are they comfortable moving forward?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's just so many layers, right? Because not every transaction has a loan modification. So you may have done 10 different deals that are creative, right? And one's a straight seller finance, one's a hybrid, one's sub two, now another sub two, but none of them could have had loan modifications. And if it just happened yesterday, obviously that's super risky. And if it happened 2 years ago, then it's way less risky, right? But if you've never even seen it before, how would you even know that to begin with? And who would you ask? The title company isn't really going to provide you any counseling on that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I think the other key thing that I think you mentioned earlier that we haven't really touched on is you're involved in real estate, but your primary focus is not on buying properties. And it's funny that kind of we all, I think me, Liz, and yourself all kind of got started in either buying or wholesaling, right? And you found out, like Liz found out pretty quickly she didn't like doing wholesaling. She was actually doing wholesaling with me and Cortland and Weston before you ended up joining in with us. And then, same thing with you and not being your passion. And when you were saying that you did wholesaling, I was like cracking up because like knowing your personality, I'm like, you are such a transaction coordinator. But it's like so cool that, you can get involved in real estate so many different ways, right? And one of the new ways that me and Liz are kind of getting involved is in lending. And so that's like another example, right? Where you don't necessarily have to buy the property or own the property specifically, or be the wholesaler or be a real estate agent in order to do real estate. Like being a transaction coordinator is a very lucrative way to be in real estate without doing those things that we outlined. It's especially important if it doesn't fit your personality.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think I'd love to hear like one of the biggest lessons that you've learned that you wish you knew earlier in your journey.
Gosh, that's such a good question. I don't know if I would necessarily change my path, because I think part of wholesaling made me a better TC, knowing underwriting, deal structure, the exit strategies. But I would tell myself, like, if I told my younger self anything, I would tell my young 20s, like, get into real estate early. Get into real estate early. I actually owned a house in Iowa when I was corporate at age 26. And I would tell that girl, you hold on to that house. You keep it a rental. It was $100,000 house, you guys. Like, it was so silly, but I sold it when we moved to San Francisco. But I would go back and tell my 20s, go to real estate, go into real estate and do it early.
I love that. I love that advice. And I think we all, I mean, looking back, I definitely wish I would have done it sooner too. I had reasons why I didn't, but now looking back at them, like, were those even valid? And I would have had similar situation like when I lived in North Carolina still, like the area I lived in North Carolina, I am 1,000% sure I could have bought a house for like 5 figures. I just am like, oh, like this is so killer. And I rented and it was a great spot. Like I could walk to work. Like it was awesome. But that being said, like, man, it would have been the perfect like opportunity to house hack into like a rental property or two, and then,
Hmm.
rent those out to like other healthcare professionals, like really close to the hospital where I was working. And I would have had the network already. And it's just like, so
Hmm.
great, great, great recommendation. I had one other question for you about, just kind of what you've been doing on a day-to-day basis since you started your own, TC firm. And it's so different from corporate, right? Being an entrepreneur and just the day-to-day is probably looks a lot different. So I'd love to hear about like habits or routines that you develop to stay productive and focused as
Hmm.
you're working through your day-to-day with your TC business. And then also like how do you make that into your overall vision? Because you said it's bigger than what it is right now. And I want to hear like how those day-to-day things are like building up into this, vision you have for the future.
Hmm. Yeah, I'd love to share that. So day to day, and it's like it's a work in progress. Like entrepreneurship, I call it. I've been in the messy middle, and you guys probably are in a little bit of that messy middle too, or experienced it, or audience might have experienced that like messy side of things. And I will say there is nothing better than having it be your own, right? You're in your ownership over what you're doing versus like someone else or corporate, right? It hits harder, and there's nobody that's going to work harder than you on your vision. Um, but my day to day is a little bonkers. I'll say it's a little bonkers because I wake up at anywhere between like 4:15 and 4:45, and I call it my like morning flow quiet time because the kids are sleeping, my husband's sleeping, and that is a lot of like reflection time for me where I can actually think because it's so quiet. And anyone that has littles know that it can get quite loud and there's like overstimulation happening and you're trying to do all the things. So that is like my favorite time. So no matter how tired I am, I still get out of bed and I take that morning quiet time. Um, and then I have on my calendar, so time block is really where I'm going with this. So I have my time block, and then at 6 is when I do my time block for my kids. So I'm prepping for school. Jax is getting up. We're getting breakfast. Gemma's up. I'm nursing Gemma. So it's really focused on the kids, and then it's drop off Jax at school. And then when I'm back, I have a big chunk. I have help now. I hired a nanny back in November to be able to really focus on the early hours. And then she takes a nap, and then I'm present with her. So I really focus on time blocking my day. And then at night, I do more systems work. So I'm doing like more money making phone calls, emails, connection calls in the day. And then at night, it's my back end system. It's my admin work. It's maybe scheduling emails. I have a Monday system for all my transactions. So it's really kind of the backside of things, organization. I might be planning some social media now that I'm diving into that avenue. But it's really also time blocking. I want to be really transparent. You can time block your calendar of all your to dos, but also need to incorporate you time and reflection time, and whether that's a workout, whether that's meditation, whether that's making sure you're reading or doing a podcast, so that you can keep that creative space or that openness for ideas to flow in. And I think once I shifted into that recently of like, I'm going to time block and I'm going to do this for me, these ideas and visions have flooded in. And it's been exciting to kind of digest that and reflect with that and kind of figure out like what is my next vision, because I do want to inspire women, inspire other moms. I do want people to know that there are opportunities. If you have littles at home, you can do this. You just have to be fueled by it. It has to light you up, right? Like wholesaling didn't work for me. I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to call. Liz, you didn't want to call because it didn't light you up. But when you find that passion, no matter like, everyone has the same time, but like when you find that passion, like you're going to do it. You're going to get out of bed. You're going to be excited about it, no matter how tired you may feel.
Yeah, you can definitely just tell by like how you speak about it. It's very apparent like how passionate you are about this, right? And I know you talked about time blocking and, just kind of thinking about what steps you need to take in order to get to where you'd like to be. But I was wondering if maybe you can just talk a little bit about like mindset. So for those individuals that are either trying to get into real estate investing or trying to figure out where they fit, maybe you're getting frustrated, they're trying to balance another job, or maybe they started out wholesaling and they're like, man, this sucks. Like, so what would you say, like, in order to get in the right mindset to figure out like how they need to move forward?
Mm-hmm. Mindset is huge. And I will be honest, you guys, like John had a friend who shifted his mind. Like he was really big into mindset and he was like, I'm going to manifest winning the lottery. And I thought it was so crazy. I'm
Like,
like,
you're
that's
insane.
crazy.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, we're manifesting and visualizing all the time. And so when you lean into that, when you feel like something is already yours and okay, you're going to become a transaction coordinator. You're going to do your entrepreneur vision that you have, and you lean into that it's already working for you. And you just follow those steps, like whatever action, 1% better. It's going to be messy, right? Or if you have littles at home, one day you might get one thing off your list checked, and the other day you're crushing it and you got all 20 on your list done. So it's really the mindset piece of, if you get in kind of a funky state, you got to go back to the foundations, right? Like I write down what am I thinking right now? Okay, I had an event that I signed up for that I actually, after I signed up, was like, maybe I won't go because I'm not creative enough. I'm not visionary enough. Oh my gosh, there's millionaires in that room. There's people that I like look up to in that room, and I just don't feel like I fit. Why did I feel like that? Why did I feel like I couldn't be in that room? And so like writing it out, right? And you retell your story, because that's your mind sabotaging you of, it's a protection mode, right? And so it's like, if you believe you can, there is so much power to that. So
Right.
it's really finding, there's a lot of mindset things out there. There's a lot of mindset coaches out there. Find someone that you resonate with, or podcast wise, book wise, maybe even just following on social media, and just lean into that and kind of like work through those thoughts as they come up of what those limiting beliefs are.
Yeah, so true, so true. We see it all the time, right? Like even in people that you wouldn't even think would have those beliefs, like the self-limiting beliefs, they're like, well, I'm not good enough. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? Right. And so to your point, I think it is good to write it down and then like discussing it with someone and having them give you feedback of, why do you think that? And you can do it, right? Like you need people to help support you too. So I love
Mhm.
that. So outside of kind of like this mind shift that we've talked about, which is very significant and obviously very important, if you had to give like a 30-second piece of advice to someone that's completely new in their real estate, like investment journey or just real estate, like financial freedom journey, what would that be?
That's such a good one too. I would say, honestly, back yourself, right? Like full on believe in yourself and back yourself and your visions. You don't necessarily need to know the how. And you may pivot in it. Like Liz pivoted, I've pivoted, and you might find yourself like uncertain, but just keep moving forward, because you're not going to find clarity if you're just not doing anything. You find clarity when you're actually moving, and it's okay to pivot. It's okay to feel that uncertainty, but keep moving forward because that's kind of where that magic is going to happen. And then you're going to look back and be like, wow, look at that from a year ago, because I kept moving forward. And you may pivot, you may shift, and that's okay, but you just keep moving forward.
So action with reflection, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Action with
I love it.
reflection.
Yeah, that's that. Man, that is so perfect because I do think sometimes people get so caught up in trying to figure out what they want to do, but they haven't tried anything actually, like haven't actually taken any real action. So then they
Mhm.
just end up getting stuck, or they think that taking action means that they got on 10 Zooms this week, which is doing something, but it's not the action that you need to take to figure out if you're in the direction of your goals or you need to pivot, right? And so definitely the action part is key. So,
Yeah.
just thinking about in general and like this lifestyle that you're building and working with your, having the littles around and you've kind of got things, going. Our goals here are to travel more and get outside more and have fun while we're building wealth on our own journeys. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about a bucket list adventure you have upcoming or one that you've completed in the past year or so, and just hear a little bit more about that and how we're kind of doing things outside of the real estate world.
Yes. So I recently went to South Carolina. I had not done a like solo trip myself. It was with my best friend. It was a place I've always wanted to go. She's been there 2 years in Mount Pleasant, and it was beautiful. And I just soaked it in, solo time, like with my friend in this beautiful, like on the beach resort. And we just had a lot of reflection, just like walking on the beach and just taking in the nature, right? Taking in like the waves from the ocean. Our next adventure that we've talked about, my husband and I, is a family trip somewhere. Now we are in Denver, Colorado, and we're kind of figuring out our next moves. We don't know where we will move to, but we don't feel like Denver is our forever home. And so our next trip that we do as a family is going to be in a place that maybe we would potentially move to or want to move to once his lease is up in Denver with his practice. We're just kind of working on those like next steps and where do we envision ourselves. I kind of joke with him of like, I want to live on a farm. I don't want a big fancy house. Like we used to live in 600 square feet and it was I loved it. So,
What's great about this is that you have the flexibility to do that with your particular position, right? It does
yes.
allow you that flexibility. So, go
Yes.
for it because I also would like to get away. So I feel you on that. I feel you. So obviously, well, from my perspective, I think you are a guru in the transaction coordinator realm. It's very apparent that you have so much to share and give. And if there is anyone listening to the podcast that would like to work with you, so they have a deal that they would like you to TC, or maybe they would just like to collaborate with you, get in contact you, what is the best way that they can do that?
Yes. So they could go to my website. It's legacyflowhouse, HAUS.com. There's a form that they could fill out there if they have a deal or just a general question, or they could email me at Kaila, it's Kaila, at legacyflowhouse.com.
Awesome. And we have so appreciated having you on this podcast today. It has been so lovely learning from you and just working with you outside of the podcast too. So it's even better that we get to connect here and get to hear even more about your story because you're such a powerhouse and it's so great to have you on my team. Like it makes me feel so confident in the real estate transactions that I've been doing just to know that you're a part of them. And so I really thank you. And seriously, if anybody here is listening and needs a TC, Kaila is the person you should go to for sure. So once again, it has just been so lovely having you today. And we really appreciate everyone listening to From Corporate to Cashflow. And we will see you next week.
Thank you. Thank you.